The year was 2201, and humanity had long since extended its reach beyond the cradle of Earth. The stars were no longer distant points of light in the night sky, but destinations. Over the centuries, humans had settled on moons, planets, and asteroids scattered across the galaxy. From the industrial cities of Mars to the biodomed colonies on Europa, humanity's footprint was wide and varied. But for all their technological marvels, the human race had a tendency to overstep its bounds. And now, one reckoning for that arrogance had come. General Roland Sykes sat in the war room aboard the Victory's Edge, a state-of-the-art flagship of the Coalition fleet. The screens before him flickered, displaying star maps and surveillance data of the Lyra constellation, home to the human colonies of Delphi 6, Tigris, Solara, and 3 others. In the last few hours, the peaceful hum of daily life had been shattered by an unprecedented assault. "Where is it?" Sykes muttered under his breath. His fingers danced over the holographic interface, commanding the ship's tactical station to reveal the positions of the fleets assigned to defend these colonies. "Where are the damn fleets?" Captain Elena Drake, Sykes' second-in-command, stood to his right, her face etched with concern. Her uniform was immaculate, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her worry. It had been weeks of escalating tensions between the Coalition and the rebel factions in the Lyra system. Everyone had expected a few border skirmishes, even the occasional assassination attempt on key politicians. But this was something else entirely. "Sir?" Drake's voice was tight with urgency. "The attack. It's happening faster than we anticipated. The orbital defense grids are offline. No response from any of the colonies. Delphi 6 is reporting mass casualties." Sykes clenched his jaw. "Not just Delphi. All 6 colonies are under attack. What about the Lyra fleet?" Drake's hands trembled as she scrolled through the reports. Gone. Every last ship. Disappeared like they were wiped off the grid. A chill crept down Sykes' spine. This wasn't just a conventional strike. This wasn't the work of pirates, nor were these rebel warships. No, these were something else entirely. A high-pitched beep rang through the room, signaling an incoming transmission. It was from the Lyra 7 colony, a research hub located near Delphi 6, a planet known for its ancient ruins and myths of a forgotten civilization. Sykes immediately activated the feed. The face of Commander Rhea Lee appeared on the screen, her eyes wide with terror. She was standing in what looked like a command center, but the chaos was palpable. "General," she began, her voice shaking, "you have to understand this is not a human attack. I don't know who these people are, but they are—" She paused, gasping for breath, her eyes darting behind her. A loud explosion echoed through the comms, followed by the sharp sound of shouting. "I don't know if we're going to make it. They're everywhere, and they—" The transmission was abruptly cut off, leaving nothing but static in its wake. Sykes' heart pounded in his chest. "Drake? What the hell is going on?" Drake leaned forward, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into her words. "The initial reports? They mentioned something about a massive alien ship, a ship unlike anything we've ever seen. And then a voice, a transmission, I mean." "Go on," Sykes urged. "They called themselves the Worm Dominion. They said, 'You have awoken us. Prepare yourselves. The dragons are coming.'" She shook her head in disbelief, as if hearing it again might make it make sense. Sykes stared at her for a long moment, processing the words. Dragons? Dragons had been a myth, a fairy tale told to children, a symbol of humanity's arrogance and fear. But this was no fairy tale. Something ancient, something terrifying was happening, and humanity had made the fatal mistake of drawing attention to itself. He looked back at the map, his finger pointing at the darkened shape of Delphi 6.6. "We need to send a team, now. I want Drake's team on the ground. We need answers, and I need them fast. We can't afford to lose more colonies." Drake nodded solemnly. "Understood, sir. I'll prepare the Falcon. We're going in." The Falcon was a sleek assault-class shuttle designed for fast insertion into hostile environments. It wasn't equipped for long-term travel, but it was more than sufficient for a quick recon mission. Inside, Drake stood with her Team 5 highly trained soldiers, each of them hardened by years of combat and intelligence gathering. They were dressed in light exosuits, the black material molded to their forms, equipped with plasma rifles, drones, and scanning equipment. The ship rumbled as it prepared for atmospheric entry. "Prepare for descent," Drake ordered. Her voice was calm, but her mind raced. Delphi 6 wasn't just another colony. It was home to some of humanity's oldest archaeological sites. There were rumors, old stories passed down from the early pioneers, that Delphi 6 had once been a cradle for an ancient, technologically advanced civilization. The idea that this place might hold the key to whatever the worm Dominion was after sent a shiver down her spine. The ship shuddered as it broke through the outer atmosphere, the heat of re-entry making the walls of the cockpit glow red. Below them, Delphi 6's surface stretched out like a barren wasteland. Once a thriving colony, now it was little more than a dust-coked ghost town. The skyline was dominated by the remains of towering structures, half-collapsed domes, and scattered ruins. As they neared the surface, Drake's eyes narrowed. There, rising out of the sand like a monolithic tombstone, was the structure they had been searching for. The pyramid. It loomed large in the distance, its jagged edges and uneven surface standing stark against the backdrop of the dying planet. It wasn't just a ruin. It was something else. "Touchdown in 10 seconds, the pilot called out. The shuttle's landing gear hit the ground with a resounding thud, stirring up clouds of dust and sand. The ship's engines powered down, and the eerie silence of the desolate world pressed in on them. Drake was the first to exit the shuttle. The air was thick with dust, and the ground beneath her boots cracked with every step. She raised her helmet's visor, her breath catching in her throat as she looked at the pyramid. There was something about it, something that felt ancient, powerful. It was as if the very land beneath her feet was alive, waiting for something to awaken. "Move out," she ordered, her voice steady. Her team followed without question, their boots crunching in the sand as they made their way toward the massive structure. As they approached, the temperature began to rise, the air grew thick with an almost unnatural heat, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. This was no ordinary ruin. The massive stone doors of the pyramid slowly began to creak open, as if inviting them inside. The heat inside was unbearable, like the heart of a furnace, and the walls were covered in strange, glowing symbols, runes that pulsed with a faint, ethereal light. "Helena!" one of the soldiers, Corporeus, whispered. "What the hell is this place?" "I don't know," Drake replied, her voice tinged with awe. "But whatever it is, it's far older than any human structure we've encountered. It's like something ancient." The further they ventured inside, the more oppressive the air became. It was as if the very atmosphere was alive with power. And then they saw it. At the heart of the pyramid, a massive figure coiled around a stone altar. Its body was scaled, shimmering in the dim light, its wings vast enough to span the length of a starship. The creature was unlike anything they had ever seen, part reptile, part machine, with glowing eyes that seemed to flicker with an intelligence that transcended time itself. Drake's hand went her weapon, but before she could issue an order, the creature's eyes snapped open. A deep, rumbling voice filled the chamber, vibrating through her very bones. "You have disturbed my slumber," it said, its voice low and ancient, echoing in every corner of the room. "You should have stayed away." The discovery had been made. But what had they discovered? And what would it mean for the future of humanity? This expanded chapter provides more detailed descriptions, action, and emotional stakes for the characters. It sets the stage for a larger conflict, while leaving plenty of room for further exploration of the mystery behind the worm Dominion and the dragons that lie dormant in the ruins of Delphi 6. Let me know if you'd like to explore the next part or add more. The Falcon shuttle descended slowly through the hazy, orange atmosphere of Delphi 6. The sun had long since set over the ruined cityscape, casting long, shadowed stretches across the planet's barren surface. A dust storm had been kicking up on the horizon, but the crew inside the shuttle was more concerned with what lay ahead than with the weather. The mission was clear: investigate the ruins of Delphi 6, figure out what had been left behind, and uncover the truth behind the terrifying message from the Wyrm Dominion. Time, however, was already running out. Captain Elena Drake stood at the front of the shuttle's cabin, watching the planet's surface through the viewports. Her face was hard, eyes narrowed in concentration, as if trying to read the winds of fate itself. She had seen a lot in her years with the Coalition fleet, but nothing like this. The destruction of the Elara colonies had sent shockwaves through the entire system. Every hour that passed only deepened the feeling that something ancient and terrible had awoken. A force that had long been buried beneath the sand. She adjusted her helmet, securing it over her head. It was the same helmet she had worn through countless missions, but today it felt like it would not be enough. They had entered Delphi 6 expecting to find old ruins, perhaps a few dangerous secrets buried in the desert, but instead they had found something far more disturbing: an ancient, colossal creature hidden beneath a pyramid. And that creature, those eyes glowing with an eerie supernatural light, spoke in a voice that was more felt than heard, its words rippling through her very body. "You have disturbed my slumber. You should have stayed away." The words haunted her, and though she tried to bury the fear that had clawed at her insides, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of something far bigger than they had ever imagined. The ruins on Delphi 6 had never been explored in depth, and now they had uncovered the entrance to something hidden far deeper. They weren't just dealing with lost technology, they were dealing with something alive. "Captain," said Corporal Reyes, interrupting her thoughts, "we're coming up on the coordinates. We'll be on the ground in 5 minutes. Drake nodded, but she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in her gut. The Wyrm Dominion had made its presence known, and if they were right, if the ancient force had truly been disturbed, the consequences could be far more catastrophic than a few destroyed colonies. "Understood," she replied. She turned to the rest of the team, who were busy securing their gear and preparing their weapons. "Get ready. We don't know what's waiting for us down there." Kai helped her to her feet, and as she rose, she felt the weight of the arena's gaze on her. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw no smugness, no satisfaction, only the same calm, unwavering resolve that had been there from the very first moment he entered the ring. "I told you," he said softly. "This wasn't your fight anymore." Sarah glared at him, her pride stinging with the words. She wanted to strike him, to show him that she was still in control, still the strongest fighter in this world. But the reality of the situation was impossible to ignore. She had been beaten, and beaten soundly, by a person who, by all accounts, shouldn't even have been there. What are you?" Sarah asked, her voice sharp but full of curiosity. Kai didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned his gaze to the crowd, which had slowly begun to react, their shock giving way to an overwhelming sense of awe. They weren't sure whether to cheer or boo, their emotions caught between admiration for the impossible feat and the sadness of witnessing their champion's downfall. But then, as if sensing the shift in the atmosphere, Kai spoke again. "I'm just a fighter," he said simply, his tone still calm but firm. "And I'm not here for your applause. I'm here to show you that there's more to strength than what you've come to understand. What Sarah Valens represents is a single kind of power, a power that's rooted in physical ability and brutal force, but that isn't the only kind of power that exists in the world." His words carried weight, more than they should have. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't some grand speech, it was simply truth, and Sarah felt it in her bones as he spoke. The crowd, still reeling from the spectacle, hung on his every word. They didn't know who this kid was or why he had decided to challenge the most dominant force in the arena, but something about him, something in his voice, made them believe him. Sarah, however, wasn't so easily convinced. She turned her gaze from the crowd and fixed it firmly on Kai. "You've got a lot of nerve, showing up here with no name, no history, and making a mockery of everything I've worked for," she growled. "You think you're some kind of savior." Kai looked back at her, unfazed. His expression softened, but his resolve remained unshaken. "I'm not trying to be a savior. I'm just showing you the truth. There's more to power than strength. More to fighting than winning every time. It's about understanding the flow of things, the way the world bends, how it can be broken." Sarah's eyes narrowed as she processed his words. It didn't make sense. She had dominated for so long, and in an instant this stranger had come in and undone it all. She wanted to fight him again, to prove herself. But there was something deep inside her, a gnawing feeling that told her she wouldn't be able to beat him in a rematch. She didn't know if it was his confidence, his strange calm, or the way he seemed to understand her so easily, but it unsettled her. She needed to know more. "Who are you really?" she asked again, this time with a force that conveyed both frustration and curiosity. "How did you do that? I've fought thousands of opponents, but no one has ever." Kai sighed, his eyes flicking to the exit as though ready to leave. "I told you I'm just a fighter," he repeated. "But I've been trained to see things differently, to feel things differently." His gaze met hers again, his voice lowering. "And I've come to realize that the power you possess, it's not the only kind of power. There are others who can bend reality in ways you can't even comprehend." For the first time, Sarah's breath caught in her chest. She wasn't sure if he was toying with her or if he genuinely believed what he was saying. Either way, he had made her question everything she had ever known about strength, about power. And that was something no one, no matter how skilled, had ever been able to do before. As the arena's lights shifted, signaling the end of the match, Kai turned to walk away, his figure receding into the shadows. "We'll meet again," he said over his shoulder, "when you're ready to learn more." Sarah watched him go, feeling a mix of emotions swirl within her. For the first time in her career, she wasn't thinking about winning or losing. She was thinking about what lay beyond the surface of this world she had built. What other powers were out there? What other forces existed that she didn't know about? And when would she be ready to face them? The shock of what had happened lingered in Sarah's chest long after the lights dimmed and the crowd began to dissipate. She had lost, and worse, she had lost in a way that she could not understand. It wasn't just her body that had failed her in the ring, it was her mind, her very perception of what it meant to be strong, to be a fighter. Everything she had based her entire career on had been upended in one single move. The arena, once deafening with excitement, now felt like an alien landscape. She had been carried backstage by a few staff members, their attempts at congratulating her falling on deaf ears. They kept saying things like, "You'll be back next time, champ," or "It was a fluke, don't worry." But none of their words mattered. None of them knew what it felt like to be broken in the way she had been. This wasn't about winning or losing. It was about something much deeper, something far more unsettling. Sarah sat in the corner of the medical bay, her back against the cold steel wall, her combat armor still strapped to her body. The soft hum of the equipment around her did little to calm the raging thoughts in her head. She replayed the fight over and over, searching for an explanation, a crack in the system that would give her a way to understand what had just occurred. How did he do it? It wasn't just that Kai had beaten her. That was something every fighter had to accept at some point, that there would always be someone stronger, faster, or smarter than you. But Kai hadn't just beaten her. He had done so with an ease that she couldn't fathom. She'd felt it the moment he touched her, an unsettling stillness that took over her body, as if her very essence had been neutralized. And she still had no idea how. "Get it together," she muttered to herself, pushing off from the wall and standing up, her hands resting on her hips. She could hear the muffled sounds of the crowd outside, but it didn't matter. She had to focus on the facts. One thing was clear: she couldn't afford to let this defeat define her. Not if she wanted to keep her place in this world. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everything she had built. The empire of fans, the sponsors, the fame. If she didn't come back stronger, faster, better, she would lose it all. And that wasn't something she was willing to accept. She was snapped from her thoughts as the door to the medical bay swung open. Gage, her manager, stepped in, his expression a mix of concern and frustration. He hadn't said a word when she was carried back to the locker room, his silence weighing heavier on her than any verbal reprimand ever could. He was her closest ally, but in moments like this, he didn't know what to say. She took a seat by the bed. "You okay?" Gage asked quietly, his voice more gentle than usual. Sarah gave him a half-hearted nod. "I'll be fine." He raised an eyebrow. "You don't look fine. You don't look like you've been in a fight. You look like you've had your world ripped out from under you." Sierra turned away, not wanting to meet his eyes. "I don't know what happened, Gage. It's like he just paralyzed me. I've never felt anything like it. It was like he controlled my body. Like he knew exactly what I was going to do before I even thought about doing it." Gage's expression shifted from concern to something more serious, a subtle realization forming in his mind. "You think he has some kind of ability? Some tech?" "I don't know," she said, frustration creeping into her voice. But it wasn't just his physicality. It was something else. He felt different. Something in his eyes, the way he moved. He wasn't just anticipating me, Gage. He was reading. Gage was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. "I've been in this business long enough to know that people can do incredible things when they're at the top of their game. But this doesn't make sense. You've fought some of the best in the world. You've outsmarted and outlasted people who had the best tech, the best training. But this..." Sarah's head spun. "But he didn't even have any tech. He wasn't enhanced. He wasn't like anyone I've fought before. He was just a guy. And yet he was something else entirely." Gage finished for her, his voice taking on a tone of both wonder and caution. "This changes everything, Sarah. If he can do that, if he can get into your head like that, you need to figure out who he really is, fast." Sarah clenched her fists, her mind racing with possibilities. "I'm not going to let this go. I'll find out who he is, and when I do, I'll make sure he understands that no one beats the Fury." The following days were a blur. Sarah spent hours in the gym, her body aching from the previous fight, pushing herself to the limit in an attempt to regain her focus and her strength. She trained harder than she ever had before, analyzing her own weaknesses, trying to understand what had gone wrong. She studied Kai's movements, his every gesture from the moment he stepped into the ring, his calm, his confidence. She realized, as she replayed the fight over and over in her mind, that it wasn't just his physical prowess that had been unsettling. It was his composure, his ability to stay in control no matter what. She had always believed that strength was about domination, about taking control of the fight. But Kai had shown her a different kind of strength, the kind that wasn't reliant on force, but on awareness. Sarah wasn't used to this kind of vulnerability. It gnawed at her, threatening to unravel everything she had worked for. Determined to uncover the truth, she ordered a full investigation into Kai Voss. She wasn't the kind of person who relied on others to find answers, but this time she needed to know. Her security team dug through every available database, looking for any trace of the young fighter. But as the hours passed, the search turned up nothing. No records, no previous fights, not even a single mention of his name outside of the recent event. It was as if he had materialized out of thin air. Sarah wasn't surprised. After all, if there was one thing she knew about the world she inhabited, it was that there were people, forces, beyond the reach of the established systems. People who existed in the shadows, outside the law, beyond the technological grasp of even the most advanced organizations. And Kai Voss, he was one of them. It was a few days after the fight when she finally tracked him down. A series of encrypted messages and hidden contacts, Sarah found an address, one that led her into the deepest corners of the city, far from the gleaming skyscrapers and pristine corridors of the corporate headquarters. It was a small, run-down building nestled between two high-rise towers, its walls covered in layers of grime and rust. It looked abandoned, but Sarah had learned long ago to trust her instincts. She knocked on the door, her heart pounding in her chest, not from fear, but from something else, a kind of anticipation she hadn't felt in a long time. The door creaked open, and there he was, Kai. He didn't look like the fighter who had taken down a champion. There were no signs of arrogance or pride on his face. He simply looked human, normal. His clothes were casual, nothing like the flashy gear of an arena fighter, but there was a strange stillness in his eyes, something almost ancient, as if he had seen and understood. "You came," he said, his voice soft yet heavy with meaning. "I knew you would." Sarah didn't hesitate. She stepped inside, the door closing behind her with a soft thud. "You've been avoiding me." "I haven't been avoiding you," Kai replied, his expression unreadable. "I've been waiting for you to come to me." Sarah crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "You didn't answer my question before. What are you? Why did you fight me?" "Because you were ready," Kai said simply, his gaze steady. "You've always been strong, Sarah, but you've never truly understood what that strength is." Her jaw tightened. "And what's that supposed to mean?" Kai's lips curled into a small, enigmatic smile. "It means you've been fighting the wrong battle."